Armie Hammer, a very hungry narcissist? This video provides an analysis of the actor Armie Hammer as a consequence of recent revelations about his behaviour. Armie Hammer is an actor. Last week he was trending on Twitter as a consequence of unverified screen grabs of extremely lurid text messages allegedly sent by him between 2016 and 2020 that were posted by the Instagram account at House of Effie, which also compiled nearly half a dozen examples of women who claim to have had an affair with Hammer while he was married. These allegations include a variety of matters, including suggestions of cannibalism. Such disclosures merit placing Hammer under the Tudor scope, as we ask, is Armie Hammer a very hungry narcissist? Armand Douglas Hammer was born on the 28th of August 1986 and is an American actor. The son of businessman Michael Armand Hammer and the great-grandson of oil tycoon Armand Hammer. This evidences a privileged upbringing, which is the potential for a lack of control environment, one of the ingredients relevant to the creation of a narcissist. Hammer began his acting career with guest appearances in several television series. Being an actor doesn't mean that he is a narcissist. However, our kind are prevalent in the acting profession, as well as narcissistic individuals who are not narcissists, since the ability to perform and to adopt the persona of a different person on a routine basis does require strong narcissistic traits. Hammer's first leading role was as Billy Graham in the 2008 film Billy: The Early Years, and he gained wider recognition for his portrayal of the twins, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, in David Fincher's biographical drama film The Social Network of 2010, for which he won the Toronto Film Critics Association Award for Best Supporting Actor. Hammer went on to portray Clyde Tolson in the biopic J. Edgar in 2011, play the title character in the western The Lone Ranger 2013, and star as Ilya Kuryakin in the action film The Man from U.N.C.L.E. 2015. In 2017 he starred in Luca Guadagnino's romantic drama Call Me By Your Name, for which he received a nomination for the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor and a nomination for the Independent Spirit Award for Best Supporting Male. The following year, he portrayed Martin D. Ginsburg in the biopic On the Basis of Sex. And on Broadway theatre, he starred in a production of Straight White Men in 2018. Accordingly, he has a reasonably prominent film career and stage career, and with that, if he is a narcissist, he will enjoy access to the prime aims, control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits through an extensive matrix. In May 2010, Hammer married television personality Elizabeth Chambers. The pair were introduced by Hammer's friend, artist Tyler Ramsey. They have 2 children. On July 10, 2020, Hammer and Chambers announced on their Instagram accounts that they were separating after 10 years of marriage. Not all relationships that end do so because of the presence of a narcissist, but a larger number of relationships, particularly marriages, will end owing to the presence of a narcissist, although this is not generally recognised. Hammer is known for his outspoken political and social charged views on social media accounts, more of that presently. This exhibits a sense of entitlement, provocation, and absence of emotional empathy. For years, the core of Hammer's allure as a star has been the juxtaposition between his pedigree, appearing as an ultra-wealthy, mega-wasp great-grandson of an oil tycoon, and his eagerness to talk about certain things that rich white people from polite society invariably don't talk about. He likes tweets about BDSM, boundary recognition issue, welcomes the opportunity to tell interviewers about his childhood cases of ringworm, boundary recognition issue, and seems to revel in hinting at the kinkiness of his sex life, boundary recognition issue. Before we address the recent disclosures evidencing an alleged preference for BDSM behaviours and cannibalism, let's look at other aspects of Hammer's history. 2011, marijuana arrest. In 2011, Hammer was arrested at a United States Border Patrol checkpoint in West Texas after a drug-sniffing dog discovered marijuana in his car. Arrest records show he had 0.02 ounces of marijuana, 3 medical marijuana cookies, and 1 marijuana brownie at the time of his arrest. Whilst this is not something that would ever put the activities of Pablo Escobar to shame, the fact that he was engaging in drug use shows a sense of entitlement. The fact that he was carrying items which were illegal or unlawful demonstrates a sense of entitlement and a lack of accountability. He would later spend 1 day in jail before paying a $1,000 bond. El Paso's attorney declined to prosecute the case, as the amount of marijuana Hammer had would account to a misdemeanor, leading to the charges being dropped. In 2013, Hammer said during an interview on Conan that the arrest was a misunderstanding of laws and interstate laws versus state laws, and apparently federal laws supersede state laws. I mean, who knew? Let's just say it was a great learning of the legal system. Potential blame shifting, lack of accountability. Rough sex comments. 7.5 years before Hammer's alleged DM surfaced, he candidly spoke about his penchant for BDSM during an interview with Playboy. I used to like to be a dominant lover. Sense of entitlement, provocation. I liked the grabbing of the neck and the hair and all that. But then you get married and your sexual appetites change. Potential waning of fuel, he said in June 2013, 3 years after tying the knot with Chambers. And I mean that for the better. It's not like I'm suffering in any way, but you can't really pull your wife's hair. It gets to a point where you say, I respect you too much to do these things that I kind of want to do. This shows an interesting dilemma. He still wants to behave in that way, but the presence of veneer prevents him going down that route with the intimate partner primary source. BuzzFeed, back and forth. Hammer tweeted in November 2017 that the chronology of a BuzzFeed opinion ed was spot on, though he felt the writer's perspective was bitter as fuck. Provocation. Maybe I'm just a guy who loves his job and refuses to do anything but what he loves to do, he added. Sense of entitlement. In February 2018, the movie star attempted to reignite the feud. Hoovering, provocation, assertion of control, telling the journalist Peterson via Twitter that she should try meditating or even medicating because her glass seems chronically half empty. Sense of entitled comment, lack of emotional empathy, provocation, assertion of control. Countless celebrities and fans shared personal photos with Stan Lee in November 2018 after the legendary Marvel Comics writer's death. Hammer was perplexed by the social media posts, sarcastically tweeting at the time that there was no better way to commemorate an absolute legend than putting up a picture of yourself. On the one hand, of course, he may well have been demonstrating the hypocrisy of certain individuals. However, this does demonstrate, even where he might well be right about those observations, a lack of boundary recognition, a lack of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement to make such a comment around the time of the death of somewhere where people perhaps engaging in misguided and even narcissistic observations themselves. While the Golden Globe nominee later apologised for inadvertently offending many who were genuinely grieving the loss of a true icon, he reversed course in 2019. I do not feel badly for the people that I offended who met Stan Lee once and were capitalising and masking self-promotion as false grief, he told British GQ at the time. Again, he's probably right about the observation and was provoking other individuals who were behaving in a narcissistic fashion. However, it is interesting to demonstrate that the apology that he gave was quite clearly false contrition. He didn't mean a word of it. Toe-sucking video. In July 2019, Hammer shared a video to his Instagram followers of his then 2-year-old son Ford sucking Hammer's toes. This happened for a solid 7 minutes. Hashtag footy fetish on fleek. He captioned the post. His wife, Chambers, joked from behind the camera that it wasn't normal, though she later assured fans that her children's safety and well-being is always our first priority. First of all, the fact that he allowed his son to do that without causing him to stop, even though he's only a 2-year-old child and wouldn't know any better, evidences the fact that there is no assertion of boundaries. Furthermore, a lack of emotional empathy. But it goes further. The fact that a private act between father and son, and one which would ultimately cause embarrassment to his son, and his desire to share this on Instagram, shows a lack of emotional empathy for his son, a lack of boundary recognition, a sense of entitlement. The fact that in effect he finds it amusing demonstrates an inability to empathise with the situation for those that might see the video, that he sees nothing wrong. He evidences a lack of accountability for sharing this. His wife, of course, tries to counter this behaviour, though it's interesting how she was unable to stop him. Quite possibly she may not have realised necessarily what he was doing, or, as the victim of a potential narcissist, perhaps felt that there was no more that she could do than add her comment verbally. Saudi Arabia trip. Hammer was among the celebrities and social media influencers who received a backlash in December 2019 for accepting all expenses paid trips to Saudi Arabia, which has had a history of human rights violations. The stars documented their stays via Instagram. Hammer raved that the trip was truly special. He never publicly responded to the criticism that was demonstrated towards him. This shows a lack of awareness, a sense of entitlement, a lack of accountability, and also the assertion of control by ignoring the criticism that was levelled at him and, of course, other individuals. He was not alone with regard to evidencing such behaviours. Playboy Interview. In an interview with Playboy magazine in 2013, Hammer lifted the lid on his wild sexual habits with women in previous relationships. Note multiple relationships. That in itself, of course, doesn't mean that somebody is a narcissist, but it is a common narcissistic behaviour to have a number of relationships. And furthermore, wild sexual habits are often associated with a hypersexualized behaviour of the boundary-free narcissist. Hammer told Playboy magazine, "Well, if you're married to a feminist as I am, then I don't know how much we can put here without my parents being embarrassed, but I used to like to be a dominant lover." Hammer later blamed what he called oversharing about his past sexual exploits on alcohol. Blame shifting. "Let's just say hindsight is 20/20. Don't drink during an interview," he told E! News. Of course, if you know that you're going to undertake an interview, an individual might have regard for the impact of their behaviour and therefore would ensure that they didn't drink beforehand. A narcissist, lacking a sense of accountability and a lack of emotional empathy for those who were affected by the interview and exhibiting a sense of entitlement, may well drink and become drunk, appearing at the interview in such a state. In an interview with Elle magazine in 2019, Hammer claimed that a former girlfriend once tried to stab him in bed. "One chick tried to stab me when we were having sex," Hammer said. "I should not be telling this story." Yet he is. Sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy, lack of accountability. She was like, "True love leaves scars, you don't have any." And then she tried to stab me with a butcher knife. He added, "Of course I promptly broke up with her." 7 months later. Note that Hammer doesn't actually find this tale distressing in the slightest, and he invariably finds it entertaining to detail this, to demonstrate that he was with someone who behaved in such a manner. Of course, it remains to be seen whether that actually happened. Narcissists do, of course, habitually lie, but assuming that his story was accurate, the manner in which it is told shows a lack of boundary recognition, and the fact, of course, where he references that he promptly broke up with her 7 months later demonstrates that he didn't actually find it the alleged act something that would cause him to walk away from the relationship. At the time, of course, it may well have threatened his control, but then he will have used it to his advantage, and he ended the relationship on his terms 7 months after the alleged incident. As a result of his various online antics, Hammer's been the subject of a number of op-eds since he broke through in the entertainment industry. In November 2017, BuzzFeed made waves by publishing an article titled 10 Long Years of Trying to Make Armie Hammer Happen. This article in effect suggested that possibly Hammer wasn't a truly unique star who's finally finding his niche, or rather he was a beautiful pedigreed white man who's been allowed, in a way that very few others in Hollywood have, endless attempts to achieve fame and success. Such an article, of course, would amount to challenge fuel to a narcissist. It would challenge the narcissist's sense of control by suggesting that he wasn't talented, that he had been given favours in order to allow him to achieve fame and success. Hammer clearly felt that this did affect his control and responded by referring to the journalist as bitter as fuck after reading her viral story. He subsequently announced that he would be taking a break from Twitter, only to then return 2 months later and fan the flames with the journalist person once again. Hoovering, assertion of control, contradictory behaviour. Hammer's marriage. Rolling Stone reported on the 16th of October 2020 that in new legal documents, Armie Hammer was reportedly claiming that divorce proceedings with his wife, Elizabeth Chambers, can't move forward until she returns to America with their 5-year-old daughter, Harper Grace, and 3-year-old son, Ford Douglas Amand. Accordingly, that was why the actor was requesting that his estranged wife return from the Cayman Islands, where she was currently staying with their children, after the whole family decided to quarantine there at the beginning of the pandemic. Assertion of control, potential lack of emotional empathy for the circumstances of other individuals. Hammer reportedly returned to their Los Angeles home in July 2020, around the time that Chambers filed for divorce. According to the legal documents, Hammer's lawyers claim that, as the coronavirus pandemic worsened in the United States, Elizabeth and Armie elected to stay with their children temporarily in the Cayman Islands, where the pandemic appeared to be under greater control. Armie returned to Los Angeles in July with a promise from Elizabeth that she and the children would follow shortly thereafter. To date, however, Elizabeth and the children remain in the Cayman Islands, and Armie has not seen the children in several months now. Of course, this may well be the case that such a promise was given to him, and if so, of course, the failure to abide by this promise threatens the control of the narcissist. Indeed, the failure to act upon this promise would wound the narcissist, needing the narcissist to assert control over the intimate partner primary source by making such an announcement, which in effect is triangulating the intimate partner primary source with the media, and provoking, in order to cause a response both in terms of control in the moment, but also then causing an outcome with regard to forcing, although it's labelled as a request, but in fact forcing the return of the family members to Los Angeles. Accordingly, even if Chambers gave such a promise, her failure to abide by it will affect the narcissist's control in the manner that I have just described. Of course, it must also be borne in mind that no such promise was actually given, And it's quite possible that that was the case, given the fact that evidently the marriage was in difficulties. And it may well be the case that, acting out of a sense of entitlement, Hammer returned to Los Angeles for reasons of his own, and then decided that he wanted his family to come with them, and therefore there would be the revision of history as a consequence of this alleged promise. It is important to understand that a narcissist will, even where the facts demonstrate that there has been a failure by somebody to do something, cause them to respond with a necessity to assert control, and particularly invent circumstances through the revision of history. We don't know precisely whether any such promise was given, but it is useful to analyse the behaviour to demonstrate how a narcissist would respond if such a promise were given and not acted on, or how a narcissist may very well invent the existence of a promise in order to provoke, to triangulate, and to assert control. Many of you listening will be familiar with incidences of when you have been accused of doing something that never actually occurred, and in other instances where the narcissist has used something that has occurred and has used it against you in a disproportionate or outlandish manner. Hammer also said in the filing, "When I asked Elizabeth when she was coming home, however, she first told me that the airports were closed. Then I was informed through her attorneys that flights were merely limited, but that she and our children would be back in Los Angeles on the first flight in October. It is now several weeks into October, and they have not returned. Again, if this is true, the failure to return will wound Hammer, requiring him to assert control and cause him to take legal action and to make such statements to the press. Making such a statement, whilst of course he's in the public eye, and therefore it is expected to some extent that there would be comment, this is a private matter appertaining to his marriage and to his children, and ordinarily somebody that exhibited emotional empathy wouldn't be moved to have to comment about it, simply stating, 'These are private matters, please respect our privacy.' Instead, of course, the narcissist needs to assert control, and does so by issuing press statements and issuing court applications and talking about the same. As a consequence of the allegations that have come about, and we shall be addressing those shortly, the Daily Beast reported that eagle-eyed social media users have been combing through Hammer's social media channels, noting that he follows hashtags like #KnifeSkills and #Shibari, the latter of which is a style of Japanese rope bondage used in some fetish play. Again, the fact that somebody indulges in fetish play does not mean that they are a narcissist. However, when you establish that an individual is a narcissist, it is unsurprising that such an individual would have an interest in such things as knife skills and shibari as a consequence of the threat, the assertion of control, and the provocation. The Daily Mail newspaper obtained video of Hammer licking unidentified white crystals off his friend's hand while saying, "Shit's getting weird." This suggests potential drug taking, again, a sense of entitlement and a lack of accountability. Another video which had been unearthed seemed to show Hammer drinking a beer while driving. In some places, to do so is illegal, and of course, imbibing alcohol whilst controlling a vehicle results in impairment. Again, this demonstrates a sense of entitlement, a lack of emotional empathy, and a lack of accountability. The Daily Mail also surfaced photos and videos allegedly from Hammer's private Instagram account, including a video of a woman on all fours on a bed in lingerie, her buttocks apparently reddened, and an image of the actor taking a drag from a vape device alongside the caption, "When you realise they don't test for DMT on drug tests," followed by posts alluding to how he's required to take these tests to visit his kids. Again, interestingly, the fact of showing such a picture shows a sense of entitlement and a lack of boundary recognition. Making such comments with regard to drug taking and engaging in that, notwithstanding the fact of being a father, demonstrates a lack of emotional empathy and a sense of entitlement. The fact that somebody has evidently been caned or spanked, causing their buttocks to be reddened, shows a particular assertion of control through this particular form of sexual interaction. And just from that video in itself and the caption encapsulates a lack of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement, a lack of emotional empathy, triangulation. And so, to the allegations surrounding the text messages allegedly sent by Hammer, which have recently surfaced. Rolling Stone on the 16th of January 2020 reported that last week, unverified screen grabs of extremely lurid text messages allegedly sent by actor Armie Hammer between 2016 and 2020 were posted by the Instagram account at House of Effie, which also compiled nearly half a dozen examples of women who claimed to have had an affair with Hammer while he was married. It's worth pointing out, of course, that the screen grabs are unverified. However, on the basis that they are legitimate and attributable to Hammer, this will provide us with further insight with regard to the behaviour of a narcissist. The allegation that there are various women who have apparently had affairs with Hammer while he was married, again, if legitimate and based upon evidence, demonstrates a common dynamic of the narcissist. Infidelity, the exhibition of a sense of entitlement to have sex with other people whilst married, a lack of emotional empathy for the spouse, a lack of accountability for the behaviour. Also, the arrogance and haughtiness that is exhibited in this manner because Hammer knows that he's a famous person and therefore would run a risk of exposure for his infidelity, but the type of narcissist that he is, he has no regard for the collateral consequences of that, because all he cares about, driven by his unconscious narcissism, is the necessity of him asserting control in the moment by having sex with those individuals. It is clear that if those affairs had taken place, that his wife would be in a sustained devaluation as the intimate partner primary source, and that he was engaging with multiple intimate partner secondary sources for the purposes of gaining fuel and control over them through the act of sex. Rolling Stone reported that some of the fantasies contained in the screen grabs were dark, to say the very least. In one, Hammer professes his desire to bite pieces off of the recipient and eat her heart. Now, of course, it is not the case that Hammer is actually a cannibal, and I suspect that he is not, but rather it is the intention of making such statements driven by his narcissism that this is done for the purposes of asserting control, to provoke the individual, to show a sense of ownership of being able to eat that person. Of course, his narcissism may well have caused him to believe that making such observations were almost a form of flattery, that someone was so delicious they were good enough to eat. But of course, a recipient receiving such messages would invariably find such observations to be somewhat strange. In another screen grab, he is purportedly stating, "I'm 100% a cannibal. I want to eat you." Fuck, that's scary to admit. I've never admitted that before. Again, if this is legitimate, such an expression shows a lack of awareness, a lack of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement, the assertion of control, a sense of ownership, objectification of the recipient. By saying that's scary to admit, he's not at all scared by the admission. If he was, he would have kept such a thought to himself, and it shows a sense of entitlement to share that, and also false contrition. It's important to remember, of course, that these screen grabs have not been verified, and Hammer himself has denied that they are legitimate. Of course, if they are, their surfacing, of course, would amount to a threat to his control, and it would be unsurprising that Hammer would deploy, unconsciously, the first line of the narcissistic twin lines of defense, denial. The graphic Instagram direct messages that Hammer allegedly penned to a woman included talk of rape fantasies, sense of entitlement, boundary violation, lack of emotional empathy, BDSM, and cannibalism. Again, certain things that within the realm of fantasy may never come to pass. Invariably, they do not. Furthermore, many people who are not narcissists will engage in such fantasies, but they would either keep them to themselves or would only share them in an anonymous way, or with someone they were in a long-standing relationship with, whereby they knew that they shared such views and would not disclose them. Hammer, if these direct messages are his, is sharing this information with more or less a complete stranger, not somebody who he could necessarily rely upon to keep their mouth shut, and therefore making such comments to this woman shows a sense of entitlement, poor boundary recognition, and a lack of accountability for his behaviour. Also bear in mind that these are being sent when he's married, showing a lack of emotional empathy for his intimate partner primary source. Although these messages are unverified, House of Effie attempted to prove their authenticity by sharing private photographs alleged to be from Hammer. One includes an undated photo that seems to be sent from Hammer's official Instagram account, where he grabs his neck, presumably to imitate choking himself. Another photo is of a male's hands splayed out across a script on a wooden table, and purports to have been sent from Hammer's Instagram account in an undated message. Visible on the man's ring finger is a small tattoo. Notably, Hammer has a similar-looking tattoo on his ring finger, having previously had Chambers' initials inked on his ring finger shortly after they married in October 2010. Sense of ownership, idealization. House of Effie also supplied voice messages, where a man, purported to be Hammer, describes his sexual fantasies and speaks about the messages in question. House of Effie explained that she initially shared a video that referenced her alleged affair with Hammer, sense of entitlement, infidelity, lack of emotional empathy, prompting other women to come forward and their stories to go viral. The user wrote, "Women approached me with their affair stories as we talked, overwhelmed with grief for days and nights without sleeping or eating, with some ending up in the emergency room." Of course, it's worth bearing in mind that certain individuals may well be those that jump onto the bandwagon, as was witnessed in the #MeToo movement, but even if some of these individuals who've come forward are jumping on the bandwagon, and it does happen, there are likely to be various legitimate individuals who are evidently experiencing the outcome of being a victim of the narcissist's behaviour and are now feeling edified suitably to be able to come forward and share their experiences. This also evidences further affairs that Hammer has engaged in, and demonstrates on his part, again, a lack of emotional empathy for his spouse, a sense of entitlement, poor boundary recognition, and a lack of accountability. House of Effie continued, "We collectively decided we have to speak out after how we were treated and seeing how the women in 2020 were being treated by him. We cannot allow more women to endure what we are going through in the future." The accuser claims the women that Hammer allegedly was having affairs with recently united and were able to piece together a 5-year timeline of his alleged activity. Again, if this is accurate, Hammer evidences the assertion of control in the moment, not caring about the fact that there was potential exposure by a number of people getting together through the auspices of social media. He will, of course, have been aware of the presence of the Me Too movement, but his narcissism will not have given one fuck about that. Instead, it would continue to drive him to transgress over boundaries, trample on people's emotional empathy, pursue his sense of entitlement, all with regard to asserting control over these women in terms of having affairs with them, and it would appear by abusing them. The user went on to state, "They concluded that when Hammer had a fight with his wife, he'd reach out to his kitten, and when they had a fight, the next day he would just reach out to his other kitten with the same message. Naturally, all fights revolving around Hammer's bad treatment of women." This is a very indicative paragraph indeed. If accurate, where it states that Hammer has a fight with his wife, the intimate partner primary source, there is a threat to his control. And therefore, in order to assert control, no doubt he would have argued with her, and he then reaches out, hoovers the kitten, which I understand is a reference to the affair partner, the intimate partner secondary source of a shelf variety. The wife is painted black, so he cheats on her by going to the intimate partner secondary source. This is a standard dynamic with certain narcissists. The paragraph continues that states that when he has a fight with the intimate partner secondary source, i.e. gives them a corrected devaluation, he just then goes to a different one. So it appears that he attempts to hoover the intimate partner secondary source, who perhaps is sick of being treated in a self-dynamic or indeed subjected to abusive behaviour, and rejects his hoover. In order to assert control, he then ignores that individual and goes and chooses a different intimate partner secondary source instead, evidencing a large intimate fuel matrix for this individual. The paragraph states that naturally all fights revolved around Hammer's bad treatment of women. It evidences that in the responses that were provided from the intimate partner secondary sources was indeed to reject him for his abusive behaviour towards them. The Rolling Stone continues by stating that it's unclear how many women are behind the allegations. During this time period, Hammer was still married to Chambers. In a number of the alleged messages, Hammer appears to reference Chambers. In an exchange via Facebook in April of 2017, Chambers is brought up again. A woman asks, "Did you fix that problem?" And when Hammer quizzes, "What problem?" dismissiveness, she replies, "The fuck your wife so she let shit go problem." Hammer answers back, "Ha ha 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 ha, not yet, but I bought a pill for tomorrow night just to make sure I seal the deal. They've bumped her from first class, and we didn't even sit next to each other." Dismissiveness, triangulation, lack of emotional empathy, devaluing behaviours. Another message from Instagram dated Christmas Day 2019. The accuser claims she told Hammer's wife about their alleged affair. Hammer allegedly writes, "As long as you fucking promise never to do anything like that again." Threat. Assertion of control. House of Effie also shared a clip from an interview posted by Netflix in November 2020, where Hammer declares that his dream dinner guest would be the Marquis de Sade, a French philosopher and author whose works helped coin the term sadist to describe sexual cruelty, character trait acquisition. He was known for his libertine sexuality, and his works depicted sexual fantasies which included a heavy focus on violence, suffering, and anal sex. The Page 6 podcast found further information from other individuals who have had relationships with Hammer. Armie Hammer's latest ex said that their romance was like dating a wannabe Hannibal Lecter, as the Hollywood star's idea of pillow talk was fantasizing about which of her body parts he'd like to roast and devour. Again, it's unlikely that he would actually carry out such acts, and instead, this was possibly seen by Hammer as flattering behaviour to suggest, as I mentioned earlier on, you're good enough to eat, or it was an act of devaluation by suggesting that he wanted to do such an unpleasant act to an individual. He said to me he wants to break my rib and barbecue and eat it, app founder Courtney Vusokovich exclusively told the Page 6 podcast. "Fuck, that was weird, but you never think about it again," she said of overlooking the odd behaviour at the time. The observation that he made was provocation and assertion of control. She reported that he says, "I want to take a bite out of you." Sense of entitlement, objectification. She explained, "If I had a little cut on my hand, he'd like suck it or lick it. That's about as weird as we got." The claims by Vusokovich follow, of course, the recent allegations about the viral cannibal fury as a consequence of the direct messages being viral. One of the messages that was shared by House of Effie, Hammer allegedly asked a partner if he could cut off one of your toes and keep it with me in my pocket, so I always had a piece of you in my possession. Again, it's likely that when Hammer said this was being done to actually try and flatter an individual. It demonstrates a sense of entitlement, an assertion of control, objectification, trophy gathering, which is something that certain narcissists do. While Vusokovich, who dated Hammer from June to October in 2020 couldn't confirm whether the specific screenshots provided by House of Effie were legitimate, she said they were no surprise. He likes the idea of skin in his teeth, she claims. Vucekovic explained that her relationship with Hammer was not only weird and gross, but also emotionally abusive, devaluing behaviour and abuse. She explained, "He enters your life in such a big way, grandiosity. He's such a captivating person, charisma, magnetism, seduction. He has such a presence, and he's aware of that, and he uses it in such a way that most women would think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Golden period, flattery, love bombing. But especially young women. That's kind of the scary part. How good he is at active manipulation and making you feel like he's never felt this way about anybody." Of course, triangulation, the magical thinking of the flattery that the narcissist says, "I've never felt this way about anybody before," a line which, of course, is used every single time. With regard to Hammer's charm and charisma, Vucekovic found herself submitting to him physically and emotionally, only to realise that she was being manipulated and gaslit. "He quickly grooms you in the relationship. Seduction, assertion of control," she explained. "He kind of captivates you, seduction, and while being charming, he's grooming you for these things that are darker and heavier and consuming." At this juncture, Vucekovic will not understand the nature of this particular narcissist, whereby there isn't actively a charming to be done for the devaluing that occurs. That is something that is as a consequence of her fuel becoming stale, or a threat to control, or as a consequence of the fuel not being provided as often or as in such large amounts as required unconsciously by this particular narcissist. It is a common misunderstanding that many people think that the narcissist is actively grooming someone for the purposes of then deliberately wanting to abuse them. That is not the case with most narcissists. Some do that, but most do not. And that is a matter which is addressed in separate videos and is out with the course of the discussion today. She went on to say that he's consuming in terms of mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, just everything. This demonstrates the sense of ownership that the narcissist has over the victim, the need to consume them, to control them, the hegemonic control and dominance of the individual, to draw everything about them, to consume it all and to control. Vucekovic claims Hammer is a chameleon. The narcissist invariably, of course, shifts into various appearances, behaviours, because of the lack of a true self, and there is the fluid exterior, which is the construct. She said, "That's what he did to me. I gave and gave and gave until it hurt." This is not an uncommon reaction of a victim of a narcissist. Eventually, Hammer's behaviour turned obsessive, Vucekovic claimed. At one point, she and Hammer spent 3 weeks together, 24/7, monopolisation of time, assertion of control. And when they weren't together, she says he would text her 100 times a day. Assertion of control, monopolisation of time, lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement. Many of you listening will be familiar with the behaviour of the narcissist of monopolising your time in such a way by wanting to spend time with you all of the time, and when not physically present, messaging you over and over and over again. This is done through the seduction period, is the assertion of control, the drawing of fuel. Vucekovic continues, "I wasn't safe," she realised. "He kind of makes it like, I'm going to teach you things. I'm smarter than that, but where was I during that?" This is the fact that she perhaps didn't recognise precisely what she was dealing with, and the presence of emotional thinking obscuring it. She continues, "I knew the whole time, I had this gut feeling the whole time that this was not right, he's not well." But notice, she didn't get out straight away. Vucekovic claims that Hammer would drink and do drugs all the time, which left her feeling compromised and scared. Sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, common dynamic of certain narcissists, lack of emotional empathy for the victim. "He did some things with me that I wasn't comfortable with. Lack of emotional empathy, manipulative behaviour. For God knows what reason, he convinced me that these things were okay, And he put me in some dangerous situations where I was not okay, where he was heavily drinking, and I wasn't drinking that way, and it scared me. I didn't feel comfortable. Devaluing behaviour, lack of emotional empathy, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. She added, you end up doing things that are very out of character for you, including sex acts. Sex is used as a devaluing tool, causing the victim to engage in sex acts that they find abhorrent or are uncomfortable with for the purposes of asserting control and for the purposes of drawing fuel, something that I expand upon in the book, Sex and the Narcissist. Vucekovich declined to name the sexual acts because she didn't want them to overshadow the toll Hammer's emotional abuse took on her. She describes Hammer as one of the most broken people that she's ever met. He makes you feel bad for him, pity play, and that's really scary and keeps you close to him, she explained. Assertion of control, and of course the corruption of the victim's empathic traits by causing them to remain in the abusive relationship with the narcissist rather than escaping. He needs you, she said. He actually needs you. She is correct, although of course his needs are based on the prime aims and not for the reasons that she thinks. She continues, it's a full-time job when you're with him, the way that I was, she explained. I was trying to catch my breath the entire time I was with him. You're drowning in this dark hole trying to stay afloat. There will be random moments of good that convince you to stay. Sustained devaluation, respite period, a standard dynamic between narcissist and the intimate partner primary source. Speaking with the Daily Mail newspaper, Vucekovich described Hammer as a huge narcissist. Last, the N-word appears. He sends audio messages with pretty graphic stuff, sense of entitlement, provocation. I swear it's because he likes the sound of his own voice, grandiosity. He's obsessed with himself, grandiosity, self-preoccupation, sense of entitlement, but also hates himself at the same time. She's inaccurate about that, a common misunderstanding with regard to narcissists. I don't know how to explain it. Vucekovich said the relationship ended following an explosive fight and Hammer left. Argumentativeness, assertion of control by withdrawal. He blows up women's lives like that and walks away, she says. Sense of entitlement, assertion of control, through the third assertion of control, withdrawal. Following their breakup, Vucekovich found herself having panic attacks, thinking about what she endured in their volatile relationship. Her chest hurt and she struggled to breathe, so she checked herself into a 30-day partial hospitalization program for post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma. I didn't want to carry that into my future, she explained. As a strong mental health advocate, I knew that this relationship was something I needed to process with help from people who specialize in trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. That is my experience. With regard to the allegations that have been made about Hammer, his representative didn't respond to numerous requests for comment. Although the representative called the viral allegations were called bullshit in response to news that he was stepping away from his rom-com with Jennifer Lopez, Shotgun Wedding. I am not responding to these bullshit claims, but in light of the vicious and spurious online attacks against me, I cannot in good conscience now leave my children for 4 months to shoot a film in the Dominican Republic, Hammer said in a statement, adding, Lionsgate is supporting me in this and I'm grateful to them for that. A failure to respond is the assertion of control by withdrawal, labelling the claims as bullshit, aggression, provocation, dismissiveness, denial. Apparent empathy for children by stating that he can't in good conscience leave his children for 4 months, where, of course, this is the individual who regularly cheats on the mother of his children with no due regard for the impact that causes upon them. Of course, he sees nothing wrong with his behaviour because his narcissism will blind him to it. Another one of Hammer's former girlfriends, the writer Jessica Henriquez, tweeted, if you are still questioning whether or not these Armie Hammer DMs are real, and they are, maybe you should start questioning why we live in a culture willing to give abusers the benefit of the doubt instead of victims. A valid observation, and if you want to understand more about that, I suggest you listen to my video, The March of the Love Frauds. Henriquez, who was pictured on a date with Hammer on August 31st, 2020, later took to Instagram to add, it takes an army to hide a predator. Behind every abuser is a team of people working hard to cover up the trail. Indeed, she is describing the coterie of a narcissist. The writer reportedly blocked Hammer on social media shortly after their August meeting. It's unclear how long they dated, the imposition of a no-contact regime. Henriquez previously posted a meme to Twitter that showed a picture of her with Hammer, bearing the caption, "How it started," alongside a screenshot showing Hammer's blocked account with the words, "How's it going?" The post was uploaded on October the 30th. Another woman Hammer was recently said to be dating, model Paige Lorenz, tweeted Sunday, "Anyone got a good therapist?" as the messages were first leaked. Henriquez responded to the post the following day, telling Lorenz, "Yeah, girl, I'll send you the number," accompanied with a wink face emoji. A request for comment, as reported to Lorenz's publicist, was not yet returned. Another House of Elfie accuser, for instance, replied that having sex with a belt around her neck felt like too much, but to which the actor allegedly said he wouldn't clasp the belt and proceeded to do so anyway. If this disclosure is true, this exhibits objectification, the assertion of control, a sense of entitlement, a lack of accountability, contradictory behaviour, and hypocrisy. There are a raft of allegations about Hammer, and he is an individual that demonstrates a huge sense of entitlement, an absence of emotional empathy, a lack of accountability, haughty behaviours, dismissiveness, a range of various narcissistic manipulations, no boundary recognition, and a raft of aspects of the narcissistic dynamic as described earlier in this video. As a consequence of the repeated and habitual indicators and the various aspects of the narcissistic dynamic as described, it is very clear that Armie Hammer is indeed a very hungry narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.